Tim Kaine didn't walk into that Senate chamber looking for polite answers. He walked in ready to pull the mask off Pete Hegseth, and from the very first minute you could feel it. This wasn't some routine confirmation process, it was a public trial, with the cameras rolling and the nation watching. And what unfolded was a rare kind of political showdown, the kind that exposes not just facts but character. Kaine's target wasn't only Hegseth's record, it was his integrity. And what came out in that back and forth has left people asking if Hegseth is fit to lead at all. The moment that set the tone was Kaine's return to the October 2017 incident in Monterey, California.
You acknowledge that you cheated on your wife and that you cheated on the woman by whom you had just fathered a child. You have admitted that.
I will allow your words to speak for themselves.
You're not retracting that today. That's good. I assume that in each of your weddings, you've pledged to be faithful to your wife. You've taken an oath to do that, haven't you?
Senator, as I've acknowledged to everyone in this committee, not a perfect person, not claiming to be.
But no, I just asked a simple question. You've taken an oath like you would take an oath to be Secretary of Defense in all of your weddings to be faithful to your wife. Is that correct?
I have failed in things in my life, and thankfully I'm redeemed by my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
In finalizing divorces from your first and second wives, were there non-disclosure agreements in connection with those divorces?
Senator, not that I'm aware of.
If there were, would you agree to release those first and second wives from any confidentiality agreement?
Senator, it's not something I'm aware of.
But if there were, you would agree to release them from a confidentiality agreement?
Senator, that's not my responsibility.
Did you ever engage in any acts of physical violence against any of your wives?
Senator, absolutely not.
But you would agree with me that if someone had committed physical violence against a spouse, that would be disqualifying to serve as Secretary of Defense, correct?
Senator, absolutely not have I ever done that.
You would agree that that would be a disqualifying offense, would you not?
Senator, you're talking about a hypothetical.
I don't think it's a hypothetical. Violence against spouses occurs every day. And if you as a leader are not capable of saying that physical violence against a spouse should be a disqualifying fact for being Secretary of the most powerful nation in the world, you're demonstrating an astonishing lack of judgment. The incident in Monterey led to a criminal charge, a criminal investigation, a private settlement, and a cash payment to the woman who filed the complaint. And there was also a non-disclosure agreement, correct?
It was a confidential settlement agreement off of a nuisance lawsuit.
Right. During an interview, you claimed that you settled the matter because you were worried that if it became public, it might hurt your career. Do you maintain that you were blackmailed?
Senator, I maintain that false claims were made against me. And ultimately,
your attorney
those
used
false
the
claims,
phrase,
I have the opportunity to attest my innocence in those false claims.
But you didn't reveal any of this to President Trump or the transition team as they were considering you to be nominated for Secretary of Defense. You didn't reveal the action. You didn't reveal the criminal complaint. You didn't reveal the criminal investigation. You didn't reveal the settlement. You didn't reveal the cash payment. Why didn't you inform the commander-in-chief and the transition team of this very relevant event?
Senator, I've appreciated every part of the process with the transition team. They have been open and honest with me. We've had great conversations between the two of us, and I appreciate the opportunity that President-elect Trump has given me.
You chose not to reveal this, right? Because you knew it would hurt your chances. So you chose not to reveal this really important thing to the commander-in-chief and the transition team because you were worried about your chances rather than trying to be candid with the future president of the United States. Are there any other important facts that you chose not to reveal to the president-elect and his team as they were considering you to be Secretary of Defense?
Senator, I sit here before you an open book, as everyone who's watched this process.
With multiple non-disclosure and confidentiality agreements tying the hands of many people who would like to comment to us. Much has been made of your workplace behavior as a leader of nonprofit veterans organizations and as a Fox News contributor. Were you fired from either of the leadership positions with the nonprofits?
I was the leader. I was the CEO of Concerned Veterans for America and the executive director of Vets for Freedom.
Were you fired from either of them?
And I was never fired from a veterans organization.
Do you have non-disclosure agreements with either of those organizations?
Not that I'm aware of, Senator.
Many of your work colleagues have said that you show up for work under the influence of alcohol or drunk. I know you've denied that, but you would agree with me, right, that if that was the case, that would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense.
Senator, those are all anonymous false claims, and the totality
They're not anonymous.
the letters
We've
on the
seen-
record here.
They're not anonymous.
On the record, people
We've
who've
seen
worked with
records
me
with
at
names
Vets
attached
for
to
Freedom,
them.
Concerned Vets for America, and Fox News
One of
attributing
your-
to me
one of
being
your colleagues
working
said-
hard every day on behalf of
One of
my
your
mission.
colleagues said that you got drunk at an event at a bar and chanted, "Kill all Muslims." Another colleague, not anonymous, we have this, said that you took coworkers to a strip club. You were drunk, you tried to dance with strippers, you had to be held off the stage, and one of your employees in that event filed a sexual harassment charge as a result of it. Now, I know you denied these things, but isn't that the kind of behavior that, if true, would be disqualifying for somebody to be Secretary of Defense?
This was a story that
Senator,
had been whispered
anonymous
about
false
for
charges.
years,
They're not
but Kaine
anonymous.
dragged it
And
right
I'll
into
just
the
conclude
open.
and say this.
At the time, Hegseth was still married to his second wife. Yet just 2 months earlier he had fathered a child with the woman who would later become his third wife. That detail alone carried enough weight to make anyone shift uncomfortably. But Kaine wasn't done. He pressed harder, pointing out that while Hegseth claimed he had been completely cleared of wrongdoing, being cleared of criminal charges doesn't erase the reality of infidelity or the timeline of betrayal. Hegseth's response was a familiar one. The charges were false, he said, fully investigated and dismissed. But Kaine refused to accept that as the final word. His point was simple. You can't call yourself clean while standing in the middle of broken vows and unresolved scandals. The law may not have punished you, but the facts tell their own story. That exchange set up the deeper question at the heart of this hearing: what does integrity really mean? Kaine didn't want sound bites about redemption or half-hearted claims of mistakes. He wanted Hegseth to face the contradiction between preaching military discipline and failing at personal accountability. Soldiers are expected to live by codes of honor and responsibility. Leaders are held to even higher standards. So how can a man who publicly admits to cheating on one wife and betraying the mother of his newborn child demand loyalty and discipline from those under his command? Hegseth, visibly uncomfortable, leaned on a familiar shield, his Christian faith and his belief in redemption. He acknowledged he wasn't perfect and had failed in parts of his life. But Kaine wasn't asking about forgiveness from God. He was asking about trust from the American people. Redemption may save your soul, Kaine implied, but it doesn't erase the need for accountability when you want to hold one of the most powerful jobs in the world. And just when it seemed the questioning might move on, Kaine raised the issue of secrecy. Were there non-disclosure agreements tied to Hegseth's divorces? Had ex-wives been legally silenced about his behavior? The very suggestion lit up the room. Because NDAs aren't just pieces of paper, they're shields that keep the public from knowing what really happened behind closed doors. If such agreements existed, it could mean damaging truths were buried in exchange for silence. Hegseth claimed ignorance, saying he wasn't aware of any NDAs, but that answer only deepened suspicion. How could someone who has fought multiple divorce battles not know if confidentiality agreements were part of the settlements? It wasn't the reassurance Kaine was looking for. Instead, it left the image of a man with secrets still locked away, waiting to be unearthed. Kaine didn't stop there. He cut to the core of what kind of conduct should disqualify a nominee for Secretary of Defense. He asked whether spousal abuse or sexual assault would disqualify someone. For most people the answer would be obvious, of course it would. But Hegseth ducked, calling it a hypothetical, and again returning to his personal insistence that the charges against him were false. Kaine pushed back hard. Domestic violence isn't hypothetical. Assault isn't a theoretical exercise. These are daily realities, affecting countless families. For a leader of the Pentagon not to be able to state outright that such conduct would be disqualifying, that in itself was shocking. Kaine made it clear that judgment matters, not just denials, and judgment was precisely what Hegseth seemed to lack in that moment. And then came the bombshell revelations about the Monterey case. Kaine laid out the sequence. There had been a criminal charge, an investigation, a private settlement and a cash payment. On top of that, a confidentiality agreement had been signed. Hegseth tried to brush it all off as a nuisance lawsuit, the kind of thing public figures face all the time. But Kaine dismantled that defense by asking the obvious: if it was truly nothing, why pay? Why settle? And more importantly, why keep it from the transition team and President Trump when they were deciding whether to nominate him? Transparency isn't a courtesy in a process like this, it's a requirement. And by hiding such a critical event, Hegseth showed that protecting his career mattered more to him than being honest with the people evaluating his fitness for the nation's top defense post. The silence wasn't just questionable, it was disqualifying, but Kaine still had more. He turned the focus from personal scandals to professional misconduct. He cited multiple colleagues who had spoken out about Hegseth's behavior, reports of him showing up drunk to work, accounts of him chanting anti-Muslim slurs while intoxicated, allegations of strip club outings that led to harassment claims. These weren't anonymous rumors, Kaine emphasized. Some came from named individuals. Even family members had been cited in official documents. Hegseth's response was predictable: blanket denial. He dismissed it all as false, politically motivated attacks. But denial after denial began to feel rehearsed. Kaine wasn't asking for admissions of guilt, he was asking for accountability, and instead of accountability, all the Senate heard was evasion. But the bigger picture was starting to come into focus. Kaine wasn't trying to relitigate every scandal in Hegseth's past. He was highlighting a pattern: concealment, denial, and refusal to confront the gravity of serious accusations. And that pattern mattered because this wasn't about running a nonprofit or appearing on television. This was about leading the Department of Defense, overseeing millions of service members, and holding responsibility for national security. The question wasn't whether Hegseth had ever made mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. The question was whether his record of secrecy and deflection made him unfit to hold the keys to the Pentagon. In the closing moments, Kaine drove the point home. Leadership at this level isn't just about experience or credentials, it's about trust. The American people don't just want a Secretary of Defense who knows strategy, they want someone whose character can withstand scrutiny, someone who won't conceal settlements, someone who won't dodge questions about violence and harassment, someone who can be trusted to hold others accountable because they hold themselves accountable. Kaine's interrogation was more than political theater, it was a reminder that integrity still matters. And when a nominee fails that test, the consequences ripple far beyond personal embarrassment. They shake the very foundation of public confidence in government. The hearing ended with Hegseth still insisting he was an open book, but Kaine's questioning had made it clear that many chapters of that book were smudged, missing, or deliberately redacted. And that left viewers with a choice: believe the denials, or believe the evidence of a pattern stretching back years. For many, the answer was obvious. When the stakes are this high, credibility isn't optional, it's everything. Tim Kaine didn't just ask questions, he issued a warning. If the Senate ignores the red flags and moves forward anyway, the message is clear: political loyalty matters more than character. And that's a dangerous precedent for a country that depends on its leaders to embody the very values they demand from those who serve. So what do you think? Did Tim Kaine expose the truth about Pete Hegseth, or was this all political theater meant to score points? Either way, the implications are huge, and they won't be forgotten anytime soon. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because the next story we're covering is even more explosive, and you won't want to miss it.